Velkommen tilbage. Der var en, der ikke ville med, men så må man jo pålægge vedkommende tvang. Men velkommen til igen til alle vores paneldeltagere, den her gang kollektivt. Og nu sidder de godt nok ikke i den rækkefølge, jeg havde forventet, men for en god ordens skyld, Tom og Kjær fra Brandfolkenes Cancerforening, Lars S. Sørensen fra Dansk Bygningsinstitut ved Aalborg Universitet, Kjær brandchef fra Sørensen, Juha Laitinen, forsker fra Finland, og endelig har vi så Forrest, som var vores sidste taler. Liselott Blixt har jo som sagt forladt os for at begå sig i en god sags tjeneste og skaffe flere ressourcer inden for sundhed, og måske også snart for brandredning. Intentionen med paneldebatten, det er både, at man kan diskutere internt blandt paneldeltagerne, og selvfølgelig med sagen. Men jeg vil gerne om vores paneldeltagere sådan ganske kort, 2 minutter hver, hvis vi kan godt på noget, lige opsummere, hvad man gensidigt har fået ud af dagen, og hvilke temaer man synes, vi skal vægte i diskussionen. Og nu hvor jeg satte jer i en anden rækkefølge, end jeg havde håbet på, så synes jeg, at vi begynder med dig, Juha.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, for me, it's quite clear that firefighters' exposure is becoming more and more difficult and dangerous in the future. We need much more efficient way to reduce firefighters' exposure in future. And I see that we have lots of things to do with personal protection and also in the firefighting techniques, how to reduce exposure. And also I see that we have improvements, for example, in the firefighting phones, how they expose firefighters in future. That's the new trend, I think, what we have to think about also. And I think that it's also very nice that we have very tight community who fighting for firefighters' rights, and it's important that we doing that together. I think this is.
Thank you so very much. Mange tak for det. Det var meget præcist og kortfattet som ønsket. Så er det Lars S. Sørensen og Forrest.
Tak skal du have. Jamen, det jeg synes, vi skal fokusere mere på fremover på det her år, det er jo i hvert fald at se mere på den giftighed, den øgede giftighed, vi ser i vores brande, som bare sætter endnu mere fokus på det her område, fordi det vil sandsynligvis også vise, at der er en ekstra øget risiko altså for, hvad skal man sige, erhvervsbetinget cancer for brandfolk, end der var for 50 år siden, hvor vi havde et andet billede, en anden fordeling af røg eller en anden indhold i den røg, brandfolk udsat for. Så synes jeg også, at vi skal, jeg har i hvert fald fået det ud af det, at vi kan lære meget fra for eksempel Canada, af deres legislation, altså deres lovgivningsmæssige tiltag på det her område, som ligesom kan anerkende erhvervsbetinget kræft i brandfolk. Og det mener jeg, at vi skal tage ved lære af i Danmark, og specielt at så politikerne nu, der skal gå banen, kan man sige. Og så skal endelig, så synes jeg, at vi skal have mere fokus på de der lavthængende frugter, altså hvorfor vente med at måske også stille øgede krav til hvad skal man sige, renholdelse af udstyr og vaskning, og altså gøre det med virkelig professionelle maskiner, der siger sådan. Det er noget, der kan gøres for en billig pris, og det har en stor effekt. Det var det.
Tak for det. du siger billig pris, og når vi kommer til økonomi, så tror jeg, det er noget, det bliver et af de større fornemmelser samtaleemner, men også med Canada, som jeg sagde tidligere, er jo fyrtøj og opdannet præcedens, så det er jo et meget, meget stort og vigtigt bidrag, vi har fået her. Men vil vi også have et stort og vigtigt bidrag, det er jo for dig, som ikke har de næste 2 minutter lige.
Ja, tak. Ja, vi skal selvfølgelig bevare fokus på de her positive tiltag, der allerede er i gang i de nordiske lande, nemlig at se videre på ren og uren områder, altså hvordan vi indretter brandstationer, hvordan vi uddanner brandmænd. Det er selvfølgelig vigtigt at vide omkring de her problemer her. Men det er jo ligesom vist i dag, at vi ikke kan bruge arbejdsskadesystemet til noget, og derfor så mener jeg, at vi skal have lovgivning på banen, simpelthen at lave den her lovgivning. Og der er vi nødt til at stå sammen, alle sammen, for at få det presset ordentligt igennem. Fordi med en lovgivning, så følger der altså også nogle forpligtelser. Og de forpligtelser, det er jo netop at skabe bedre forhold for brandmænd. Og det, der skaber, igen som jeg siger, det, der skaber bedre forhold for brandmænd, skaber altså også bedre forhold for vores borgere og for hele samfundet som sådan. Og hvis man ser et overblik, vi har sådan her tænke i kasser, også rent økonomisk, så hvis vi ser et overblik på, er det gavnligt for samfundet, eller dyrt for samfundet eller ej, jamen så har vi lige hørt, at i Canada, der har man altså den erfaring fra hver dollar, man giver ud til brandfolkenes sundhed og sikkerhed, så får samfundet faktisk $2 tilbage. Og det er sådan nogle ting, der vil følge med i lovgivningen. Så det er det næste skridt, og vi skal holde sammen om, det er, at lovgivningen selvfølgelig alt det andet automatisk med. Tak.
Tak for det. Alex?
Yeah, there is no borders when it comes to firefighting. Whether it's the Nordic countries, Germany, Australia, Canada, United States, anywhere around the world, nothing exemplifies the global world more than firefighting. Firefighters are fighting fires every single day in every country. They're coming in contact with cancer-causing agents, and there's no way to protect us. And it's a matter of fairness. This has come to Canada, this has come to the United States, this has come to Australia. It's just a matter of persevering through the politicalness of Europe, and sooner or later it's going to come. It's going to come in Sweden, or it's going to come in Finland, or it's going to come in Denmark or Germany, and it's going to come. Because it's a matter of fairness. There's no way a firefighter who's fought the same number of years, the same number of fires as a firefighter in Canada or United States or Australia, one firefighter is looked after and the other firefighter is ignored. It's about an issue of fairness. And I think that's why we're going to be successful sooner or later.
Thank you so much. And finally,
Yes, and just one more time, it's such an honor and a privilege for me to be here with you and talk about this very important issue. I come to this issue having been a firefighter for 27 years, having been a union president, and now have the opportunity of being a fire chief for over 7 years. And I can tell you that collaboration is so important. And, I would only encourage you to try to open the dialogue with your chief fire officers so that they appreciate and understand the issue. I've had the privilege of speaking with fire chiefs in Australia one-on-one, and at the end of the day, they want to be supportive, is what I found. They just need to understand the issue. It's not easy being a chief fire officer. It's often about the bottom line. It's about the budget impact. And so if they understand that based on our experience in Canada for over 10 years now, this is affordable and it is the right thing to do. It's supporting our firefighters, our people, right, that are delivering that essential service to the citizens. So I wish you well. I encourage you to collaborate where possible and be determined. And I see determination in everyone's eyes here. This will happen. I have that feeling, so good luck and stay with it.
Thank you so very much. Kjær, du siger, at vi får åbne, men det jeg fornemmer, det jeg synes jeg hører, Det er der 3 ord, der går igen. Samarbejde, lovgivning og endelig økonomi. For at begynde med dig, Ken. Den lovgivning, også gerne Alex og gerne bidrage, den lovgivning, man har at gøre med i Canada, den præmis, den er baseret på de rammer og forudsætninger, som er blevet skabt. Hvad er det, vi skal gøre bedre i Danmark? Hvad er det, vi skal gøre bedre i Europa for at nå det niveau, som vi har at gøre med i Canada i dag? Hvilke bestræbelser blev der gjort i sin tid til at motivere og mobilisere det politiske establishment til at nå det niveau, Canada, hvor I er i dag?
Excellent question. This did not happen overnight in Canada. We worked for over 15 years to get where we were. And we worked hard. We got politically active. We approached politicians. We got involved in the political systems. We're very politically active. We went to the media. We went to the members and say, listen, you need to help us. Everybody needs to know about this issue. We need to go to every element we can. We now have social media. Every time you have a firefighter that's diagnosed or is dying of cancer, society should know that. Because I think it was quite shocking when I asked whoever to stand up with cancer, the firefighters. Like I saw the eyes on Lisa Lott when she couldn't believe it. And I think once society realizes what the issue is, the problem we have is firefighters, quite frankly, are very humble and they're very shy. And that in some way hurts us. We have to be the ones to advocate that firefighting, it is the right thing to do. We need to get politicians. You need to keep going with the politicians. And today's politicians that you work with civically could be tomorrow's premier or prime minister, right? So you start now, it's amazing who's going to be the one. And in Canada, it was one politician in Manitoba was the name of Gary Dewar. He basically did it all on his own. He did all the work. He's the one that pushed it forward. It's amazing what one politician will do if they're committed to do it and if they have the power to do it. In Alberta, it was Ralph Klein, it was Richard Magnus. In Australia, it was Adam Brandt. I think it's going to be Lisa Lott here in Denmark. It's amazing how that one person, if they're committed to do it, they will do it. Because it's all about political will. And the biggest challenge that you will have is the workers' compensation system or the workers' compensation process is broken. And the government needs to acknowledge that. And that's a scary thing for them to do because they have to think outside the box. But they don't have to think outside the box by themselves. They just have to look to Canada, the United States, and Australia. We are dealing with it. The world didn't collapse. Firefighting budgets didn't go crazy. But one thing it did do is that a firefighter works their whole life fighting fires, never let the public down once. And the one time firefighters need the public and the government, they are being let down here in Denmark and in Europe. That's a message you have to get out, is say, you know what, we've never let you down. The one time that I need help. And one of the things that's really come out is that many firefighters who have occupational cancer, when they call me and they want me to represent them, they aren't worried about themselves, they're worried about their families. What's going to happen to my family when I'm gone? I won't have the financial support. I'm the main breadwinner for the family. So that's the message you have to get out, is that I chose to be a firefighter, but it's going to affect my whole family if I lose my job, if I'm not able to perform and be a firefighter.
Ken, do you have something to add?
So, I certainly, I certainly agree with everything Alex has had to say. To expand a little further on the health and wellness aspect of this, very, very important. Those annual medicals, screening for different types of cancer, early diagnosis. I can tell you, I could name 8 Edmonton firefighters, my people, that have had an early diagnosis with a cancer and made a full recovery. The treatment went well, and that's ideal. So, that's something to strive toward. The political action is, I mean, that truly is what it's all about. The elected officials have got that power, and so they love to utilize it for the right reasons. And again, you know, in Canada, certainly in Australia, this issue was supported by all parties. There was no opposition, and so it's an easy issue for elected officials to stand behind. And the reason is the public supports the fire service. I hope that's the way it is in Europe. That's certainly the way it is in Canada. I think that really, you know, underpinned the successes in Canada. Elected officials support what the public supports. There's always money to do priority things, right? So you need to make this a priority. You need to motivate your elected officials to make this a priority, and it'll happen.
Thank you. Jeg skal venligst gøre opmærksom på, at jeg ikke har monopol på at stille spørgsmål, så det gælder både internt i panelet og i salen. Og jeg kan se, at allerede første har markeret i øjeblikket. Du får lige mikrofonen. Og igen gerne navn og hvor man kommer fra.
Jeg hedder Lars S, jeg er brandmand og tillidsrepræsentant for fuldtidsbrandfolk. I Danmark, og det meste jeg ikke så kender, der har vi omkring 1000 professionelle brandfolk, og resten det bliver bygget på deltid. Har der været andre udfordringer i ligesom både at få dem med ind i det her med at være rene brandmænd, men også i forhold til at få anerkendt deltidsbrandfolk?
Er det et spørgsmål også til
Alex?
Ja. Alex?
Yeah, very good question. In Canada, many of the jurisdictions have included volunteer and part-time firefighters. Part of the issue though with part-time and volunteer firefighters is that you have to work X number of years before you qualify. Many of the volunteer firefighters, I'm not sure how it is in Europe, they have a much shorter work area. Like many volunteers will only work 4 to 5 years in Canada and they'll never make it to 10 years. So it's very difficult for many of them to do it. But in saying that, there are volunteers that get covered in Canada almost every month. There are volunteers that work 20, 30 years like everybody else. And if they get cancer, they get recognized the same as a full-time urban professional firefighter.
Okay. Okay, do you have something to add? I guess the question was directed to both of you.
Oh. No, again, in my province in Alberta, volunteers are covered. And, you know, I'll speak to it this way. They go into the same type of emergency situations as full-time firefighters. They're exposed to exactly the same carcinogens, and so why wouldn't they be covered? It's the right thing, and it has, again, it's not been cost prohibitive and been very widely accepted.
Mange tak. Andre, som ønsker ordet? Mathias, du snart fast i min værsgo. Når du får en mikrofon. Vi går bare til plads op i panelet.
I'll ask one of the tough questions. Of course, I think it should be prioritized, but I know that in Denmark we have had some major budget cuts, both for the regional firefighters and for the national firefighters. And I can imagine that if we really want to go this way, we have to have extensive training. We are going to build new fire stations on totally different principles that we are used to. And I can imagine there's a lot of other economic drawbacks on this, or investments in this, than this compensation. The compensation could be quite a small bit of the economic part. So, how much does it cost to change this way of thinking?
So, the top question.
Yeah, so pleased to address that. The fire service is a costly service. There are costs that are incurred. However, the job of a chief fire officer is to develop priorities and at budget time to go forward to the elected officials with his or her priorities and to stand behind them. One of the difficult things for a lot of chief fire officers to learn is that they are the subject matter expert. And if they are willing to step forward and speak to the priorities and hopefully occupational illness, improving working conditions and equipment and stations, hopefully that's a priority. It's my belief that they will receive some support. Now, this is something that you're not going to overcome immediately because you can't rebuild all of your fire stations at one time. I can tell you in Edmonton I have 27 fire stations, and many of them don't have the dirty room, the positive pressure ventilated room for their duty gear. That's a goal for us. We probably have 7 of our stations that have been retrofitted, or as new ones are built, they're built the right way. But we have a business plan to do a major renovation as budget money is available. So you can still be committed to the objective of improving conditions and work away at it. The old adage that you don't eat an elephant in one bite. You take many small bites, but eventually you will get there.
In Winnipeg, you are correct, it does cost money because there is going to be compensation payments to firefighters. There is going to be compensation payments to firefighters' families of firefighters who die. But if you look at our group, we're a very small group within the labor force. And many of the cost arguments in governments that I've had to deal with is they say, well, we aren't concerned about the cost for fire because it really isn't that big because you're such a small group. What we're concerned with is it's going to expand to other labor groups. But the arguments in every single jurisdiction I've made is we are different than other labor groups. And that's a hard argument to make sometimes when you're in that house of labor. But the bottom line is firefighters don't have any way of protecting ourselves. That's why we are the only occupation in Canada, only occupation in the United States, and the only occupation in Australia that has this specific legislation. So the cost argument really gets expanded sometimes to say, well, once we start firefighters, we'll have to give it to half the workforce of Denmark. That's not the case, and that won't happen. Because the studies are there for us, they aren't there for other professions. Other professions, even if there is a cancer risk, you can control that risk 100%. We can't control that risk. And that's why the cost argument really has not, whenever I go into a jurisdiction, the first argument we get is, well, it's too expensive, it will bankrupt the fire service. That's not the case. The second argument I get is, well, it's going to bankrupt the government because we're going to have to give it to other worker groups that are much larger than the firefighters. That's not the case either.
But it has to be addressed, right?
Yes.
That question will.
Yes. That question will come up, and I can tell you that that's going to be one of the first questions when Lisa Locke goes back to her caucus and she says, well, this is an idea X and X. They're going to say, well, how can we afford this? And it's going to cause us problems. Because as a politician, you always ask yourself, how is this going to cause problems with other areas? And that's what they're concerned with sometimes.
Et godt tip, det er, at man skal aldrig give Liselotte en god idé, hvis man ikke vil se den blive til virkelighed. Nu når vi tænker på økonomi og de nedskæringer, som vi taler om i Danmark, også på grund af finanskrisen med mere, som jo hele verden mere og mindre er blevet ramt af, så kan jeg godt tænke mig at spørge dig, Juha, nu hvor man bruger ressourcer på, og netop at forske på dit område med kræft og forbindelsen med kræft i forhold til brandfolk. Hvad er årsagen til, modsat Danmark til sammenligning, at man i Finland også har det her dagsorden? Hvor højt er det på dagsordenen i dit land, i Finland?
Well, I can first answer the compensation thing. In Finland, we are in in the starting line when we compare our situation to the Canadian situation. But I have already proposed that firefighters' exposure have to follow more precisely. And already that has caused lots of problems. And we don't get money for that as much as we should have. And but in the research side, we have had lucky that our funding agencies are giving us money for these projects. And I think the one reason for that is that we have a very good support from the fire associations, which helping us a lot in this situation. Together we are more, I would say.
Men når du siger, at I er glade for den støtte, I får fra fagforeningerne og andre organisationer, hvad så med den politiske opbakning, og hvad med den politiske legitimitet? Hvor meget er politikerne i Finland bevidst om problemstillingen? Hvor meget forståelse har de for problemstillingen?
Well, I'm afraid that there is not full understanding of the situation. Hopefully we have few politicians who really understand the situation, but I'm afraid that we don't have enough understanding.
Tommy, er det den samme situation, vi står her i Danmark? Nu hørte vi jo Ken og Alex sige, at branchen den har været for, kendetegnet for brandfolk, det er, man er for ydmyge, man er for beskedende, man er generede. Er det det samme billede, som tegner sig i Danmark? Er det derfor, at branchen ikke så står stærkt, og derfor man ikke har samme politik, som i andre lande selv har været år om år nå dertil? Er vi bagud?
Ja, i forhold til Canada er vi langt bagud. Det er man jo i hele Europa, men i forhold til det nordiske sammenhæng, der synes jeg faktisk ikke, vi er bagud her. Måske i nogle sammenhæng faktisk tværtimod, fordi vi har jo netop, det ser vi jo i dag, demonstreret en folketingspolitiker, som rent faktisk tager initiativ til en konference som den her, for at belyse emnet mere, og for at få emnet længere op på dagsordenen. Og der er flere politikere her i huset, som kender til sagen. De kender stort set til det alle sammen. Det er ikke alle sammen, der arbejder med det, men det skal vi nok få styr på med fælles hjælp. Og det er jo så her, hvor jeg opfordrer til, at vi skal stå sammen alle sammen herhjemme. Vi er jo et specielt land i forhold til beredskab med private selskaber og kommunale, der er ved at slå sig sammen nu til færre enheder og fuldtid. Der er forskellige deltidstyper brandmænd, forskellige frivillige typer af brandmænd. Og hver eneste type brandmænd har deres egen organisation eller organisationer at være medlemmer af. Og det er de organisationer, som er nødt til at skue ud over egen næsetid og så arbejde sammen. På den måde kan vi skubbe det endnu bedre, endnu stærkere, endnu hurtigere fremad mod den her helt nødvendige lovgivning. Og det er jo sådan set det.
Ja. Hvis jeg husker ret, Ken, så i dit oplæg, der var du inde på al den forskning, som findes, både i Canada, men også i Europa, Australien og andre lande. Hvis jeg forstod det korrekt, det du sagde, så var det alt den forskning, som findes i dag. Det handler blot om at aktivere den, om at bruge den. Ikke at forveksle med, at der ikke er behov for mere forskning på området. Der vil altid være behov for flere undersøgelser og forskning på området. Men det er bredt opfattet, at det handler om at omsætte til politisk handling. At det ikke bare er den ene rapport efter den anden, vi har brug for.
You know what, that's such a good point, because I can tell you that firefighting is the most extent out of any profession in the world in cancer. There's no group that's been studied more than firefighting. Every aspect of firefighting has been studied. And quite frankly, a lot of times when I go into jurisdictions, the first thing they say is, well, we need to do a study in our country or our jurisdiction. But that's only a way to put off the inevitable. Politicians always find a way. If they don't want to deal with an issue, they will say, well, we need more research. You don't need any more research. What happens is that, for instance, T. Gadati has printed the most articles in the world on firefighting and cancer. He has said that the issue has been looked at from every angle. We know, IARC knows there's carcinogens, there's pages of carcinogens that we're exposed to. We know that there's a cancer risk. It's been in every area of the world. We don't need further research on many things, but politicians use it as a way to put the issue off so they don't deal with it. You gotta hold their feet to the fire and say, listen, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have it. If you want more research, that's fine, but give us the damn legislation now, because firefighters are dying, and they're dying because of occupational cancer. So that's one thing you always gotta be cautious for. Sometimes that's not a big win when you go into a jurisdiction and they say, oh, we're going to give you money for a new study. Well, that's only a way for them to not have to deal with it for a year or two, because studies take a long time.
Ja. Andre spørgsmål fra salen? Ja, værsgo. Nede i højre hjørne. Du får også en mikrofon inden for næste 5 minutter.
Ja, jeg hedder Juha Laitinen, og jeg er brandmand, har været brandmand i 36 år. Jeg var næstformand for Brandfolkets Cancerforening. Jeg har for 2 år siden mistet min tvillingbror til også den der frygtelige brandcancer, den havde en hjernetumor. En anden ting, vi måske også kunne bruge for at påvirke politikerne, det var, at når en brandmand og hans familie bliver ramt af kræft, så er det ikke bare de bliver ramt af kræft. Man splitter en familie fuldstændig ad. Det er både økonomisk som socialt. Samtidig, når vi her i det her land får diagnosen uhelbredelig, så ophører al hjælp fra de pårørende og den ramte. Og det har jeg desværre oplevet med egen krop og synes, at det måske også værd at tage lige med i den her vinkel for at påvirke politikerne, fordi de kunne også blive ramt af kræft. Så vil jeg sige tak til det panel. I er fantastiske, og jeg synes, det er godt det her. I skal have tusind tak, fordi I kom.
I have met you before, and I had known your brother before he passed away. A question before, it said, how did we do it in Canada? Well, we did it because of people like you. We did it because we can put the issue forward and we can talk about the science and the law, but it's really you and your brother that put the face on the issue. And that's something politicians can't ignore. And that's one thing, it's a tough thing sometimes when a firefighter's been diagnosed with a cancer, especially if it's terminal. You ask them to put their lives out for us so that you can be a spokesperson. And that's one of the reasons why we were successful in not only Canada, like one of the firefighters that I worked with was Rick Stoico. He was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, and he only had a year to live, but he gave us 6 months of his life to help us lobby government before he died. Ken could give you 2 or 3 examples of spokespersons. That gentleman you saw in the video, Australia had 3 or 4 families that came forward and said, this is the impact it's had upon me. That's why it's not fair. Once you put a face behind the arguments, that's what the politicians really know, because that's why we get the public on board. Thank you.
If I could follow up on that a little bit, I think it always serves us well to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, and in this case, I'm talking about the politician's shoes. Politicians aren't unlike firefighters. They like to help people. but they're a little more risk adverse than firefighters are. And so they need a bit of a comfort level that, okay, if I go down this road, is this going to be a good outcome or a bad outcome? You need to share those stories. That actually builds the narrative for the politician to have confidence to go forward. And again, once people are aware of stories that you just spoke of, it's hard for anyone not to support that. And that, more than anything, is what has been effective, I think, is getting those narratives out there and giving the politicians the reason to support, right? I believe inherently that support is there, and that's reflected when this finally does go forward. I almost guarantee you it will be supported by all parties because it's the right thing to do. We just need to tell our story.
Men Kjær, hvis man skal fortælle politikerne historien, som du påpeger, forudsætter det så ikke, at man står stærkt sammen som i branchen og taler med én stemme, og ikke 3, 4 eller 5 forskellige budskaber?
So again, if I could, I spoke of collaboration, how important that is. And with the chief fire officers, they need to understand the narrative. They need to understand the story. And you're exactly right. If the firefighters and the fire chiefs and the elected officials are speaking from the same language, and it sounds, it sounds too optimistic, but that can happen, and that's what has to happen for it to go forward. Everybody needs to be pulling the same way, right? And the right thing will happen. So again, I encourage the union officials here, try to identify a fire officer, a fire chief who is supportive and build upon that. Find an official like Lisa Lott, like our area from Finland, and that's how you get traction. So you're on the right track. You just need to continue, right, to build those alliances.
Yeah, just a little further is that you build alliances with everybody. You build alliances with the politicians, with the charities, the spouses, the wives, and the family of firefighters. Those people tell as good a story as the firefighters because they aren't afraid, because they have skin in the game too. It's about their financial well-being of their family, especially if a firefighter dies in the line of duty. I had an army of wives that came forward and said, we want to be part of this. And when I marched to meet the politicians, and I had 6 spouses, young women, who lost their husbands who were firefighters, that's a tough thing for the politician to say no to as well, is they say, you know what, I have 2 young children. My firefighter died at 45 years old of prostate cancer. My husband died at 42 years of age of brain cancer. And I have 3 children, 13, 10, and 9. And what am I supposed to do now? I don't have any financial support. My husband never said anything. He always fought fires. He did what he was asked of him. And the one time he needed support, you turned him down. That's an important thing. Don't underestimate the power of spouses and the family to be part of this. Sometimes, like when I go to different areas, we only talk to firefighters. And I say, no, we need the spouses. We need the families to come out as well, because it's about them too. We're all a team. So that's something that's very important as well in building a coalition for success. You need everybody.
Tak, tiden er rendet ud, men jeg trækker den lige lidt mere endnu, fordi Tom, jeg godt tænke, om du kunne give os en status. Hvor stærkt står grænsen her hjemme i Danmark, når vi hører om, at det handler om at stå sammen, det handler om at tale med én stemme?
Den står svagt, vil jeg sige. De enkelte grupper, som jeg nævnte og talte om før, kan stå stærkt i sig selv og kan være en fantastisk stor kapacitet i sig selv. Så der er faktisk en hel del rigtig gode kapaciteter, som bare peger en lille smule i hver sin retning. Og det er jo netop det, der er udfordringen. Det er at skabe en platform, hvor alle tør at arbejde sammen om det. Og det er jo derfor, vi har opfundet Brandfolkenes Cancerforening, for den står uden for de her særinteresser, som fagforeninger og lignende organisationer kan bære rundt på at have. Her kan vi arbejde målrettet for brandfolkenes ved og vel og arbejdsmiljø. Så igen, det kan kun være en opfordring til alle de gode kræfter, der er. Vi skal samle os, så står vi meget stærkere, og så kan vi bruge hinanden, og det er vi brug for.
Er der et sidste spørgsmål fra salen? Det er ikke til at tilfælde sig til det, der er fuldstændig nok mig selv, det aller sidste spørgsmål. Og det er jo den klassiske måde at afrunde på, og det er at høre med Juha og med Lars. Hvor står jeres forskning om 5 år, og Tommy og Alex og Ken? Tommy, hvor tror du, vi står om 5 år, og Alex og Ken, hvad vil I gerne høre i Danmark om 5 år? Skal vi starte med dig, Juha?
First of all, I'm going to finish I was going to go and study in operative work. That's my first target. And after that, we're going to study firefighters' underwears, how much we can do with them in protection. And then I think that we need to also study the firefighters' exposure to asbestos. It's the idea what we have already. We apply money for that. And maybe in future I can also show you some results how we can use intelligent fire cures in a better way, and how that might help the fire chief to take care of the person.
Thank you. I'm sure that all of us will put you on the guest list for next time. Lars, hvad vil du gerne forske i om 5 år? Vil du gerne, hvor langt er kommet videre i processen?
Ja, om 5 år, altså det vi har gang i nu, det er jo at færdiggøre det projekt omkring flame retardants, eller flammehæmmer, hvor vi undersøger giftigheden og hvordan flammehæmmer de kan blive optaget igennem huden hos almindelige mennesker, men også på sigt hos brandmænd, skal vi undersøge. Og så faktisk Tommy og jeg arbejder på et projektforslag omkring brandes udvikling, intensitet og giftighed, som vi er ved at søge midler til, sammen med andre samarbejdspartnere også. Og hvis det bliver til noget, så starter vi nok om et halvt års tid og kører et par år. Og så er der jo også, vi deltager lidt indimellem med gisterundersøgelser, og skal muligvis også være med i biomonteringsstudie. Men det er lidt usikkert. Men ellers så vil jeg jo så sige, at der er altid brug for forskning, men jeg vil næsten sige på det her område der, som det også er sagt fra vores kanadiske venner, at der er ligesom det forskning, der skal være. Det er statistisk signifikant, det er evident baseret, at der er en en forøget risiko for at få kræft som rammer.
Interessant. Vi er også sikre på, at du kommer på gæstelisten. Tak. Om det så går 3 eller 5 år, det må vi afvente. Tommy, er du en meget tålmodig mand? Hvor langt er du om 5 år? Og hvor langt vil du gerne nå med dit ambitionsniveau, og hvor realistisk er du?
Ja, jeg er en meget tålmodig mand, men jeg er også utålmodig. Fordi at der hvor vi er om 5 år i forhold til lovgivningen, der er den her, men den skulle have været her i går i virkeligheden. Altså det er selvfølgelig lige så meget håb, som vi tror på det. Det er klart, det er i hvert fald den vej, vi arbejder. Men det er jo ikke gjort med det. Om 5 år, der er vi også der, hvor vi har fået forbedret vores procedurer, hvordan vi arbejder som brandfolk, og vi har fået forbedret vores udrustning. Som Johan selv siger, vi udvikler meget i branddragterne, der er også noget beskyttelse der. Underbukser, ikke? Og så under trøjerne faktisk også, som kan beskytte os bedre. Så om 5 år, der er vi nået langt der, der har vi formentlig og forhåbentlig en bedre beskyttelse, en bedre forebyggelse af brandfolk. Og så står branchen sammen.
Ja, tak. Alex and Ken, what do you expect next time you're going to pay Denmark? What do you expect our guest speakers to be saying next time?
Well, I really believe that within the next few years, you're going to see presumptive legislation occur in the Nordic countries first. And I think once that occurs in one country, it will go right through Europe, because it's the right thing to do. And once you have your own Ken blocks, that will be the advocates as well. And you have people like Tommy and Anders and so many people here that have been fighting for cancer. It will all come together, but it's going to be a battle. And unfortunately, I think we're still going to improve our conditions at work. I think we're going to do everything we can to minimize our exposure to carcinogens. But there's a dark side, I think, because the last 10 to 15 years, our firefighters have been dealing with the plastics, and there's a latency period. And I fear you're going to see horrible levels of cancer, even higher. You're seeing it rise in the general population, and you're going to see it get even higher within the firefighting population. So that's why when we talk about what's going to happen in 5 years or 3 years, what I'm worried about is what's going to happen 15, 20 years out as well for the level of cancer, because these firefighters that are out there fighting fires today across Europe are coming in contact with these carcinogens. And the levels today will only be seen 10 years from now in regards to scientific studies because of the latency period, how long it takes for those young firefighters that are fighting today, they're going to die of cancer 20 years from now. That's what I fear.
Okay.
Well, for myself, 5 years from now, I would love nothing better to be back here celebrating, presumptive legislation with you. And I only wish you the best. I am an optimist by nature, and I will tell you that this will happen. Stay with it. And it is, as you've heard, it's necessary. It's the right thing to do. The fire service, the public, the elected officials have got to support our primary asset, and that's our people. So our brother and sister firefighters are what makes the fire service, and we need to stand behind them. And this has to happen, Tommy, and best of luck to you. And again, I'm optimistic. You've got a couple of key elected officials here. A session like this, I think, really does generate some great dialogue. Hopefully it has increased the awareness, and I just wish you best of luck, my friend.
Mange tak. Jeg er sikker på, at jeg taler på alles vegne, når jeg siger, at det har været et privilegium at være som oplægsholder. I har alle sammen været en stor inspirationskilde, og alle sammen hver for sig et fyrtårn, som kan bidrage til den videre udvikling og den lovgivning på området, som vi har talt så meget om. Så jeg synes, vi skal give en stor hånd til vores oplægsholder, Juha Laitinen fra Finland, Lars S. Sørensen fra vores eget land, Danmark og Aalborg, Tommy og Kjær, Danmark, Kjeld Blok og Alex Forrest fra Canada. En stor tak til jer alle sammen for Please stay. Der kommer en lille anerkendelse til jer nu her. So there'll be a little gift for you, and I know some of you are going on a flight tomorrow, so either you have to drink it today in the evening at the hotel, or you have to put it in the big luggage. So now you are warned. We had our former defense minister.
So you don't get
Yeah.
You have to share. You are from the same country.
Yeah.
Our former Minister of Defense, he actually got a bottle of whiskey for some years ago, and he actually blamed the public and his soldiers because do you really want a defense minister drunk on that plane and the headlines tomorrow?
Yeah.
But do you really like me? Dislike me? That was his point.
Thank you, sir.
Because these gifts are from whole our group, and especially for Liesel, of course, she's like each of us. So thank you for whole our group. It's honored to be here. And of course, it's not possible to get this kind of sessions conference if we don't have someone who speaks 6 different languages, and only language what he is using is Dutch. Thanks.
So now I have a great opportunity to fill in my speech in German. I'm sure that my German guests will be pleased. Nej, men også for mit vedkommende, og for Mathias Lars Kjær og min kollegas vedkommende, vi i Forum for Samfundets Beredskab, eller på engelsk Forum for Civil Protection and Emergency Planning, vil vi gerne sige tak for at få tildelt ansvaret og opgaven. Det har været en fornøjelse. Det har også for vores vedkommende været en god dag. Og igen også tak til vores gæster, vores oplægsholdere, og ikke mindst publikum, som har begyndt dagen både med spørgsmål og med tilstedeværelsen. Og så, som man skal gøre, så skal man også takke publikum for at opretholde god ro og orden, men hvad andet kan man forvente med folk med brandmandsbaggrund. Med disse ord vil jeg afslutte konferencen, og så synes jeg, at de, der ikke kender København så godt, og dem, der bor i København, skal gå ud og nyde solen. Den er stadigvæk sådan 2-3 timer på himlen nu. Og til dem, vi ikke ser mere i denne omgang, vil jeg i hvert fald ønske en god hjemrejse, og på et snart gensyn inden for de næste 5 år. Tusind tak for det.